You're just a maid. This wedding isn't for people like you. The words fell like knives in the middle of the grand ballroom, echoing louder than the laughter that followed. A hush swept through the golden chandelier-lit space as the bride smirked, surrounded by her rich friends in silk gowns and diamond chokers. In the far corner, the black maid stood silently, holding a silver tray, her hands trembling, but her eyes steady. No one noticed the quiet strength behind them. Guests sipped champagne, chuckling at the cruelty as if it were a toast. But what they didn't know, what none of them could possibly imagine, was that the woman they mocked was about to change everything. Because sometimes the maid isn't just part of the service. Sometimes she's the bride. The Whitmore estate sparkled like a castle pulled from a billionaire's dream. Ivory pillars, crystal chandeliers dripping from golden ceilings, and a grand piano softly playing in the distance. Outside, Rolls-Royces and Bentleys lined the circular driveway, while inside, champagne flowed like rivers. Guests floated to the marbled halls dressed in designer couture, their laughter sharp, shallow, rehearsed. In the middle of it all, unnoticed yet present in every room, moved the maid. Her name was Amara. She wore the uniform assigned to her, plain black dress, white apron, hair tied neatly back. Her movements were careful, precise, like someone used to being invisible. As she cleared half-empty glasses and smudged napkins, two waitresses nearby giggled. "She's so quiet, it's creepy," one whispered. "I heard she used to sleep in the supply room." Another voice added, "Why is she even working a wedding like this?" None of them knew her story. None of them cared. She passed table after table. No one greeted her. No one thanked her. One guest shoved an empty glass in her direction without a word. Amara took it with a nod. Not a single flicker of emotion crossed her face. But behind her calm eyes, something was building. Something patient. Something powerful. A silver flute of rose slipped slightly from trembling fingers as Amara stepped toward the main table. The mother of the bride, Vivian Whitmore, elegant, cold, and dressed in pearls that cost more than most people's homes, turned just enough to look her way. With a slow, deliberate flick of her wrist, she knocked the drink from her hand. The glass hit the floor with a soft crack as pink wine splashed all over Amara's apron and sleeves. The room went silent for a second. Then came the laughter. "Oops," Vivian said without a hint of apology. Didn't see the help standing there. Her voice cut like glass. A wave of chuckles rippled through nearby guests. Someone whispered she should be more careful, as if Amara had poured the drink on herself. At the head of the table, the bride, Emily, leaned into her champagne glass, hiding a smirk behind perfectly painted lips. Amara stood still. She looked down at her soaked uniform, pink liquid dripping from the lace edges. She didn't flinch. No apology was asked for. None was given. Vivian waved her off like a fly. "Clean it up, please, before someone important slips." The maids nearby looked away. Even the staff didn't speak for her. With quiet hands, Amara knelt and began blotting the floor, the sounds of forks clinking and laughter returning as if nothing had happened. She stood, her clothes stained, her pride untouched. She turned to leave the ballroom. No tears, no anger, just that same quiet dignity she wore like armor. No one chased after her. No one even noticed her leave. But something had changed. Just for a moment. Someone in the corner, an elderly guest or perhaps a child, watched her with a puzzled look, as if sensing they had all just made a terrible mistake. The hallway outside the ballroom was quiet, muffled by the music and celebration inside. Amara leaned against the polished marble wall, the stain on her dress slowly drying, but her memory still fresh and vivid. Her eyes drifted toward the large family portrait hanging beside the staircase, Mr. and Mrs. Whitmore, their daughter Emily, smiling like royalty. She remembered the day that painting was hung. She had dusted the frame herself. "I've served them tea, ironed their clothes, held their child when she cried." The whisper echoed inside her mind. "And today they serve me shame." Years ago, she had entered this house not as staff, but as someone searching for refuge. After her parents died in a fire when she was just 17, she had no siblings, no savings, just a high school diploma and hands that refused to stay idle. She took the first job offered, housemaid at the Whitmore estate. She was supposed to stay for 6 months. That was 10 years ago. In those 10 years, she never missed a single day. She had polished her silver, vacuumed the hall carpets until they shone like glass, and learned their routines so well she knew when to knock and when to disappear. But in all that time, no one ever really saw her. A soft voice pulled her back. "Miss Amara?" She turned. It was Elijah, the youngest staff member, barely 16, working part-time to help his mother. He held out a clean napkin. "Here, I saw what happened." Amara took it gently, nodding once. "Thank you." He hesitated. I think you're really brave." She smiled faintly. "Brave people don't always feel brave, Elijah." And then her phone buzzed. She looked down. One message. "Everything's ready. Time to walk in as you." She tucked the phone away, straightened her shoulders, and looked at her reflection in the gilded mirror across the hall. For a moment, she didn't see a maid. She saw something more, something rising. The hallway shimmered with afternoon light, spilling through the tall, stained-glass windows. Amara stood near the rose arrangement she had trimmed herself that morning, trying to steady her breath. Guests moved in and out of the ballroom, oblivious to her presence, like always. But then, a tiny voice broke through the silence. "Hi," said a little girl in a frilly pink dress, holding a daisy nearly as big as her hand. Amara looked down, surprised. The girl's curls bounced as she smiled up at her, without a trace of judgment. "I think you're the prettiest one here." Amara knelt slightly, her stained apron still wet with wine. "Why do you say that, sweetheart?" "Because you look kind. My mommy says kind people shine, even when they're quiet." Amara blinked, taken aback. "What's your name?" "Grace." "Well, Grace, thank you. That's the nicest thing anyone has said to me today." The child placed a flower gently in Amara's palm, then skipped away, humming to herself, as if she hadn't just made someone's heart remember how to beat. Amara stared at the daisy, delicate and full of life. She tucked it gently into her apron pocket, then felt the vibration. Her phone buzzed inside her skirt pocket. She took out discreetly and read the message. "It's time. Everything's ready." No name, no signature, just those 4 words that made her heart tremble in her chest. She glanced once toward the ballroom, laughter echoing like a dull roar. Then she turned in the opposite direction, away from the crowd, toward the staircase leading upstairs. Her footsteps were soft but certain, her back straight, eyes calm. As she disappeared from view, the daisy peeked gently from her pocket, bright, blooming, and waiting for its moment to be noticed. Inside the ballroom, the celebration was peaking. Crystal glasses clinked in rhythm with the live string quartet as servers weaved through clusters of wealthy guests. Laughter bounced off the golden moldings, and the scent of imported roses filled the air. Emily, the bride, stood glowing in her designer gown, surrounded by women who looked as if they were carved from marble, perfect, polished, and proud. Vivian, the mother of the bride, lifted her champagne and waved. For quiet. "To my beautiful daughter," she announced, "who deserves a flawless day. No messes, no interruptions, and certainly," she paused dramatically, "no surprises from the staff." Laughter exploded across the table. One woman leaned in and chuckled. "Can you imagine if the maid showed up in a wedding dress?" Vivian smirked. "Darling, she wouldn't know the front from the back." The comment sent another round of shallow laughter circling the room. But just as the music resumed, a low murmur began at the back of the ballroom. One of the flower girls stopped mid-spin. Guests near the windows turned their heads. Outside the tall glass doors, a sleek black Rolls-Royce pulled up slowly along the estate's front circle. The engine purred like a panther, its body polished to a mirror shine. A valet approached the car uncertain, as if he wasn't sure he was allowed to touch it. The driver stepped out and walked swiftly to the rear door. With gloved hands, he opened it. The air changed. No one could see clearly through the tinted glass, but the outline of a figure stepping out was unmistakable, graceful, composed, and glowing. Inside, whispers rippled like a wave across the hall. "Who is that?" Did someone else invite a celebrity? I thought everyone important was already here. Even the bride's fake smile twitched for a second. The laughter slowed. And in that moment, as heels tapped slowly on the marble outside, something unseen began shifting. A storm was walking toward them, and no one had the slightest idea. The music faltered. A single note from the violinist slipped out of tune, and the room fell into an eerie pause. Heads turned toward the tall double doors at the far end of the ballroom. The same doors that guests had walked through hours earlier now stood closed again, as if holding back something the room wasn't ready for. Then, slowly, deliberately, they opened. Framed in the doorway, backlit by golden afternoon light, stood a woman, her posture straight, her hands steady. Her silhouette was familiar, and yet unrecognizable. She wore a white satin wedding gown that flowed like silk rainwater. Embroidered pearls shimmered along the hem, catching light with every breath she took. A thin veil covered her face, soft and sheer, but beneath it, something powerful radiated, something none of them had seen before. Gasps filled the air like shattered glass. No, it can't be. Is that her? Eyes widened, mouths dropped. Even the orchestra froze, bows hovering in midair. At the front of the room, the bride Emily blinked in disbelief, her fingers tightening around her bouquet. What the hell is this? Then he moved. The groom stepped away from Emily. Without a word, without looking back, he walked past shocked guests, past his own stunned parents, and straight toward the woman in white. She didn't move, didn't speak. Only when he reached her did she raise her hand. And then, gently, gracefully, she lifted her veil. Amara, the maid they all ignored, the maid they mocked, the woman no one thought twice about, now standing in white, at the center of it all, glowing with power. The room was dead silent. The groom took her hand, lifted it to his lips, and kissed it. No one cheered. No one moved. They couldn't, because everything they thought they knew about this wedding had just changed forever. The groom gently placed his hand over Amara's and guided her toward the front of the room, where Emily still stood, frozen. Her face was pale, the color drained from her cheeks, her lips parted but no words coming out. The bouquet slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. The pastor, clearly rattled, glanced toward the groom, then toward the audience, then back again. He cleared his throat and tried to regain composure. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said slowly, nervously flipping through his notes, "we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of—" He paused, confused. The groom leaned toward him and whispered something. The pastor nodded. "The union of Amara James and Thomas Whitmore." A collective gasp echoed like thunder. Guests turned in their seats, whispering, looking back and forth between the woman in white and the one in shock. Vivian, the mother of the bride, clutched her chest. What is happening?" she sputtered, her wine glass slipping from her hand and shattering to the floor. Then, without a word, she fainted. Gasps turned to stunned silence. Amara stood tall, her chin lifted, her eyes scanning the crowd slowly. She didn't need to say a word. Her gaze said everything. She looked at the waitress who giggled behind her back, at the guest who handed her a glass without a thank you, at the woman who called her creepy. And finally, she looked directly at Emily. For a long moment, they stared at one another, one woman dressed in lace and rage, the other in satin and dignity. Emily stepped forward, voice trembling. You're just a maid." Amara smiled softly, but her eyes were steel. "Not anymore." And in that silence, with the crowd unable to process what they'd just witnessed, the truth stood taller than chandeliers and louder than violins. She wasn't the help. She was a bride. And now, the room belonged to her. Amara stepped forward as the room still swirled in stunned silence. A microphone rested on a polished stand near the band stage. She reached for it slowly, wrapping her fingers around it with the quiet confidence of someone who had waited her whole life to be heard. The soft feedback echoed through the ballroom. She paused, looked across the room, and then she spoke. "I was good enough to clean your homes," she said, her voice calm and unwavering, "but never good enough to sit your table." Heads turned. Some guests shifted uncomfortably. Others stared, unable to look away. I've served you tea while you gossip about people like me. I've ironed your silk napkins while you laugh about my uniform. I've been invisible in this house for 10 years. She turned her gaze toward a cluster of guests. You, her finger pointed gently, laughed when I cried. She turned slightly. And you called me garbage when you thought I couldn't hear. She looked at Emily next. You wore white today, but it was never your dress to wear. A gasp from the crowd. Emily looked as if the ground beneath her had disappeared. Vivian, still regaining her breath, reached for her pearls as if they could save her. Amara's voice softened, but grew stronger with each word. I didn't come here to hurt anyone, but I also didn't come here to hide anymore. She turned back to the audience. Today, the people you ignored, mocked, and stepped over. Today we rise. A pause. Then, today you watched the Maid become the queen. Silence. Then a single clap. From the back. Then another. Then the room erupted. Not in mockery this time, but in slow, rising, stunned applause. Some stood. Some just blinked. But no one laughed now. The music didn't play, because her voice was still ringing in their ears. As the applause faded, Amara took a deep breath and looked toward the staff line quietly against the far wall. The same people who had worked beside her for years, many of whom never looked her in the eye. But one pair of eyes stood out. Elijah, she said gently into the mic. The young waiter's head snapped up. His face turned pale, unsure if he had done something wrong. She smiled softly. Come here. He walked nervously through the crowd, every guest watching. You were the only one who saw me when no one else did, she said. You reminded me I was still human, even when I had forgotten. She reached into the envelope she tucked inside her bouquet and pulled out a folded paper. A full scholarship to the Culinary Institute of your choice. Paid in full. Gasps. Elijah's eyes widened. His mouth opened, then closed. I don't know what to say. She touched his shoulder. You already said it when you offered me kindness. The room shifted. Eyes softened. Then Amara's expression turned sharp. But kindness deserves to be protected, and cruelty must be named. She turned toward the head of staff, a woman named Janice, the housekeeping supervisor who once told Amara to stay quiet and know her place. Amara raised the mic again. Janice, your services will no longer be required. Effective immediately. Janice's jaw dropped. You can't. I just did. The silence after that sentence was the loudest sound in the room. Then the groom stepped forward, his arm around Amara's waist, proud and unafraid. This, he said to the crowd, is the woman I fought the world for. He looked at her with something deeper than love, respect. And in that moment, even the most stubborn guests understood. She hadn't just earned her place. She had redefined it. Amara stepped forward once more, the bouquet resting gently in her hands now, the daisy from Little Grace still tucked between the roses. The ballroom was utterly silent. No glasses clinking, no whispered judgments. Just stillness and waiting. She raised the mic one last time. People always say character is who you are when no one's watching, she began. But I've learned something else. She looked around, her voice steady, warm. Character isn't how you treat the rich or the powerful or the people who can give you something. She paused, meeting the eyes of those who once looked past her. It's how you treat the quiet ones, the ones bringing your food, cleaning your mess, standing in the background. A few guests lowered their heads. Amara smiled, not with triumph, but with peace. I was never invisible. You just never looked close enough. The pianist, without cue, began playing something soft and slow. I forgive you, she said quietly, because today isn't just about me. It's about everyone who's ever been told they didn't belong. She turned toward the groom. He nodded. She looked at Elijah. He was crying. And then the crowd stood, one by one, slowly, until the entire room was on its feet, applauding not a maid, not even a bride, but a woman who walked through fire and came out wearing white. Narrator, calm, emotional voice. If this story moved your heart, if it made you think twice about how we treat others, then don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Because here, every story reveals a truth the world often forgets. A soft logo fading, gentle music still playing. Then final words, because sometimes the one you mock is the one meant to lead.